Hello, I'm Sarah Abel and welcome to the Marriage Challenge brought to you by Care for the Family. Today we're going to be talking about the subject of adoption and how that can affect a couple for good and also some of the challenges. And joining me today are a couple called Luke and Sophie. It's great to have you with us.
Hi Sarah,
Hello.
thank you.
We're not going to give too many personal details for perhaps obvious reasons, but Luke and Sophie have been married 5 years. They live in South Wales and they work for a charity. Now, the first question that we always ask our couple is, how did you meet?
Funny enough, it was in our church youth group, and I can remember I was sitting down in the corner, maybe playing a guitar or something, and in walked these three girls that we'd never seen before. And one of them was Sophie, and I can remember looking up and seeing her across the room and thinking, my goodness, what a very pleasant-looking bunch of girls.
No, that is pretty much how it happened. Yeah, it was over 11 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I remember the same thing walking in. I remember seeing Luke there with his guitar, and even now I remember what he was wearing, which is quite a weird thing because it was so many years ago. But yeah.
Yeah, so we knew each other from when we were both teenagers, so it's a very, very long time ago.
And today we're going to talk about the topic of adoption, and you have adopted 2 children.
Yes.
When did adoption become something on your radar?
I think it was always something that we discussed even before we got engaged. We'd always talked about one day we would love to have a big family, and we'd love for that to include children who we'd adopted into our families. So it was always from the very start really something that we had kind of discussed and talked about, and something that we really wanted to do.
Yeah, no, I was one of 6, and so, coming from a big family personally, that was always something that I remembered with, great fondness, and just thought this is what I'd like for us as we got married and got together and had children. And again, yeah, even before we began to have these discussions about what we thought our future would look like, we both discovered that we'd like adoption to kind of play a part in how our family was shaped. Our thinking initially was that maybe after having a few children of our own, it would be something that we did when we were a little bit older and a little bit wiser. And yeah, that was not the way that it turned out.
So how did it turn from being a kind of a theory and a discussion into a reality for the two of you?
Well, when several years after we were married and we decided, we thought we'd quite like starting to try for a family, we felt ready and we felt that was the direction, because again, we wanted to have a family quite young. We wanted to kind of give our strength and our best years to raising children and having more than a few. And so when we started, I think relatively quickly, I think there were concerns. There were a few complications that we were aware of that may have led to problems. And as the months and months rolled by and we were kind of getting nowhere, we kind of both went to see doctors and to kind of investigate a little further, just in case, not really expecting there to be any serious issues. And it very quickly was revealed that without kind of medical assistance, we wouldn't be having a family in the normal way.
It was basically said to us, wasn't it, that our options were basically IVF or nothing. So it was quite a difficult time for us then to decide what the next step was going to be for us. And then obviously in that point adoption came back into it, and there was quite a big discussion for both of us over whether we tried, because we still wanted to adopt eventually, but it was whether we tried for IVF first or whether to go straight for adoption, because we were very aware that if we adopted first, we wouldn't then be allowed to have the IVF on the NHS, so that was kind of our naturally born children kind of over. So it was a very difficult decision to kind of come to, and both of us struggled quite a lot with it, didn't we, for quite a while?
Yeah.
When you were making that decision as a couple, how did you sort of get on the same page about it? How did you sort of wrestle with that together?
It was very difficult because we were both in very different places, and we both dealt with the reality that we weren't going to have naturally born children very differently. And I think that I got very emotional and I suppose borderline depressed and kind of crying all the time hysterically. And
yeah, you began the grieving process.
It was a very deep
quickly.
mourning for me.
And the idea that this was almost something that had been taken away from us. This is something that we couldn't have, and you felt that very very strongly.
Deeply, yeah.
And I think initially I was, whether it didn't sink in fully, whether I was just optimistic about the situation.
No, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. I was like, it's not.
And for the longest of times, I think Sophie was struggling with this very strongly, especially when members of our family got pregnant and friends of ours were being pregnant. It was a very, very difficult period for us. And as that kind of continued, and I felt actually I needed to be strong for her. I didn't need to be the emotional one. I needed to bottle a lot of what I felt up. And the reality was that put us in very different places. Sophie was very emotional about it, very felt very strongly, and conversely, it appeared that I was very stoic and very unmoved by the situation.
And I found that quite difficult as well, because Luke was obviously trying to be strong for me, but the way I perceived that was that it wasn't affecting him. So I think that was, I remember we were talking about it yesterday actually, weren't we, that there was one evening where we were having quite a big argument about it, and Luke got to the point where he's like, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to break down crying? And I was like, yes, that's what I want you to do. I want you to cry. And I think it got to the point where we just realised actually we do deal with it differently, and that's okay. And that was kind of a really big turning point for us, wasn't it? Was that realisation that actually we both are feeling this, we're just dealing with it in different ways, and that's okay.
When you moved on to the decision that you were going to adopt, what was that process like, the whole sort of initial process for you as a couple going through that?
I think once we were together on that and we knew that's how we were going forward, it was a real turning point in bringing us together in a kind of a united approach to this. And so it was good because we did hit a couple of roadblocks initially when we started to kind of contact.
We were both very young.
Yeah, a big thing for us was the fact that we weren't
23,
terribly old when we began the process. And so for a lot of people, we were initially told at one point, we don't think you want to be doing this, go get some life experience and maybe come back a bit later, which was quite, it was almost like a door in the face, really, wasn't it? It was very difficult to deal with.
Especially after we'd made that decision of not going down the IVF route and going down the adoption route, to then be told, actually, no, we don't think that you're ready. It's like, who are you to tell me I'm not ready?
Yeah, but I think we were both very resolute with this. We were by this stage, we were on the same page, and we were really, walking forward hand in hand with this. And it was good to be able to fight for it, fight with each other, together to move forward. And the process that kind of begins from then on in is quite invasive, quite extensive, and the roller coaster journey is rather difficult. Lots of up and downs, lots of good days, bad days. But I think the main thing going forward, we both knew what we want and where we were going, and what the ultimate goal was, and that was something that really kind of galvanised our relationship and helped through, especially the more difficult times.
And when it finally happened and you adopted the children, what was that like for you?
Phenomenal, wasn't it? It was the best.
Absolutely incredible.
The best thing in the world, isn't it? And it was the whole way through the process, the thing that I couldn't get in my head was that moment thinking that one day we're going to be I'm getting emotional, walking down that path and knocking on the door, and the door will open and our children will be there. And then that one day that happened, and I remember walking down the path saying to Luke, like, it's now, this is it, this is it.
This is that moment.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely incredible, and it's such a strange feeling to kind of talk about meeting your children. And yet it was almost dreamlike, wasn't it? Just kind of meeting them and just beginning to form a relationship and seeing them gradually begin to trust you and call you mummy and daddy and all just these little things that we had waited for so long for, and really it had been a very long time for us to kind of get to that point. And I still look back at those early weeks and months as just some of the best of our life, and real fond memories just coming out of those early days.
What would you say in those early days were the greatest, perhaps challenges for you both, but also perhaps some of the greatest joys?
Yeah, a lot of it was the learning curve in just, how do you look after them? Just the little things like, I'd probably changed less than half a dozen nappies in my life up until this point. That I'm not great in the morning, so how do I deal with it? When my little girl runs into the room, wants to jump up and down on the bed and wake us up. When I don't deal with that very well at 5:30 in the morning, how is it that just all these things that come as new experiences? And there was so much good, so many exciting things. Getting out for day trips, spending all this time, and just getting to know our children. And yet at the same time, the added stress of, I don't know what I'm doing, the constant paranoia that you're not getting it right, or you're doing something wrong, or you're missing something important out. And then add into that just the fact that we were so shattered by the end of the day that to try and find the time to spend any quality time together. And the reality is, in the early days especially, we couldn't spend any time out of the house just because there was no one we could trust to look after the children. And so, especially early on, it was just, you know.
I think as well, we had quite a lot of time just chilling out in front of the telly, didn't we? After the kids had gone to bed, we weren't able to go out, and we didn't really want in-depth conversations because the day has been so tiring. That actually, those moments where we just found a series to watch together and we didn't have to say anything, but we just spent that time together.
Just little
was
things
quite
like time
nice.
in front of the TV or cooking each other a nice meal, and just bringing kind of the typical date night into the house very intentionally.
Were there other things that helped you as a couple to keep working together and pulling together in that time?
I think a big thing that helped us is it was good to have other people around to talk to. And again, even going through some of the difficult times before the children arrived, being able to have either close friends or family members that we could talk things through with. Because Sophie wanted to verbalise a lot of what was going on, whereas that really wasn't what I wanted to do. And so for her to be able to have people to speak to and to just to talk about the events of the day, and for me to kind of learn that process a bit better, because up until then, it was kind of okay, we could operate like that, and we found ways to communicate, but when it really mattered, when Sophie had a bad day, and particularly after I came back to work after a couple of weeks of the children moving in with us, and then Sophie is there with she's outnumbered, she's got all these new experiences, and the vast majority of her conversations are with small children, and just being able to have other people in the house, people to talk to, people to empathise. And sometimes even just to kind of bring us together a bit, having people come around and talk with both of us, and kind of drag a bit more of a conversation out of me, which was was good for both of us.
I think for me as well, it was having that permission to be able to go and talk to people, because at the start before the adoption, there was obviously a lot of personal things between me and Luke that were going on with the whole infertility stuff, that to have that permission from Luke, that I was able to go and speak to close friends and to family, because it is personal to us. So that is quite a difficult thing for him to have let me kind of open up to other people. But he saw that actually it was really important for me to be allowed to speak it through. And it wasn't that we weren't able to do that with each other, but I needed more of it, because that was what was helping me to process, was the constant verbalising it.
For me it was like, well, we've had this discussion now. We can put it to one side and move forward. Whereas you wanted to.
Whereas I almost needed it daily for me to keep on processing what was happening. And the same after the kids came, for Luke to come home and say, do you know what, you can go out with your friends tonight, go for a coffee, go for a meal, go to somebody's house. I was like, thank you, I need just people time. And it wasn't even just people time, it was out of the house time. It was that kind of feeling of being stuck in my four walls, and being able to just be released to go out and feel a little bit normal again was a real blessing to me.
And if there's anyone listening, if perhaps they're considering this whole area of adoption, going through it, perhaps they're struggling with infertility at the moment, like, what advice from looking back at your own experiences would you want to give them?
I think firstly it is totally worth it, and even now looking back at all kind of the hurt and the pain that we went through at the very start, neither of us I think would change any of that for what we have now. And it was a long journey, and it was difficult, and it was painful, but I honestly wouldn't change a single part of that for the two beautiful children that we have now.
Yeah. And so one thing I would say is really really invest in having those open conversations, and being vulnerable with how you feel is so important, because just when you open up in that way, that's when that's when you're understood. That's when your partner can really see where you're coming from, and being vulnerable, as painful as it might feel, is what will help you to work through those difficult times and really bring you closer together.
Great advice for any relationship, whatever they're going through and challenges they're facing. And on the Marriage Challenge, every month we set a challenge for the people listening, something that we can try at home during the month to help strengthen our relationship. Have you got a challenge that we could try this month? One thing
that I love to do, and I appreciate when Sophie does as well, is to buy or make a small gift, just something little, doesn't have to be anything huge, and leave it or hide it somewhere in the house. Just something that they'll stumble across one day. They'll open a cupboard door, or they'll find it on top of the fireplace or something like that, and just in that moment realise that, how much they're loved, that you're thinking about them, that you value them. And just that idea of leaving something. I can remember one morning, I'd been out to the shop late last night and just got a small gift for Sophie and the kids and left it downstairs wrapped for them to find as they came down the stairs that morning. And
it was like having Christmas, wasn't it? The
just
kids
a little
so
moment
excited.
to show that you care. So maybe just to buy or make just something small, something to show that you care.
A little note of appreciation, or
and leave that somewhere inconspicuous for them to find.
What happens if they don't find it for months?
Then you start dropping hints.
Yeah. Okay, you are allowed to drop hints if they haven't found it. Brilliant. Sophie and Luke, thank you so much for speaking so vulnerably and
thank you.
Letting us know about your experience. That's all we've got time for this month, but do join us again next month on the Marriage Challenge when we'll be looking at another topic, and it will be our special Christmas edition. Do go to our website, careforthefamily.org.uk, where you can sign up for updates from the Marriage Challenge, and if you do that, you can also get 20% off at our Care for the Family online shop. But from us, it's goodbye for now. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
You have been listening to the Marriage Challenge podcast. For further information about our courses, resources and events, visit us at www.careforthefamily.org.uk.